And it was a story about how penguins turn underwater, because the standard story of evolution is that penguins evolved from a flying bird. And so you will find statements like this from the Journal of Experimental Biology. Penguins swim by using their wings as if they were flying, flapping them to guide gracefully through the water in search of food. Well, yes, they do use their wings to swim. It's not exactly the same as flying because the upward stroke tends to be more of a power stroke than the downstroke, but this story was actually about how they turn underwater. In other words, how they rotate their bodies to change direction. Now, if we go back to a flying bird, birds fly, and when they want to turn direction, they do what's called banking turns. And in fact, aeroplanes do this too, or pilots flying the aeroplanes make the aeroplane do this. And so they tilt their wings, and so that their underside faces the outward part of the curve. But with penguins, when they turn underwater, it's not like they're flying through the air. They turn with their underside on the inner part of the curve, and they rotate their inner flipper to generate centripetal force. In other words, the force that enables them to turn. Now, this might seem like a really useless piece of trivia that might be fit for a pub quiz, but not used for anything else. But it's a good reminder that penguins were actually designed to swim. They were never designed to fly. They have always been swimming birds. So penguins have always been penguins. And in fact, the fossil record also confirms this. So when they fly through the water, they are well designed to be a swimming bird, but there's no evidence that they evolved from a flying bird. And we see this in the fossil record. If we go back to the oldest fossil penguins, now what we mean by oldest is oldest according to the evolutionary timetable. So what the evolutionists themselves think are the oldest penguins, they are actually very similar to modern penguins. And in fact, this is a quote from the New Zealand. They have a wonderful I don't know whether it's a newspaper or an online thing, but it's called Stuff NZ, which wonderful media outlet, I think, Stuff NZ. This is all about New Zealand stuff. And the oldest penguins, fossil penguins, are found around New Zealand. So they found these fossils that belonged to a penguin. It wasn't an entire skeleton, and it's dated as being 61 million years old. And one of the scientists who was involved in this said, well, this particular specimen looks very, very similar to modern penguins. And the title of their article was Waddling with Dinosaurs. So 61 million years going back to the dinosaur era, to the Cretaceous era. Ancient New Zealand penguin connects, ancient New Zealand fossil connects penguins and dinosaurs. Well, that's about the only connection, is that the evolutionists want to put dinosaurs and penguins into that same time zone. It's not that dinosaurs and penguins have any other particular connection. So the other interesting thing about this penguin fossil was that it was very large. And they actually said these were giant penguins. The large penguins presumably already moved with the upright waddling gait characteristic of today's penguins. So they were fully formed penguins that move on land the same as they move on land today. So fully formed penguins, no evidence that they have actually evolved from a flying bird, just that they used to be bigger. And we wrote about this particular find back in 2017 when the discovery was made. And then very recently, only this year, there's been a report, new species discovered, the largest penguin that ever lived. So this one is even bigger than the one that was reported in 2017. Now, it's not actually these ones I've got pictured here. These are the biggest living penguins, emperor penguins, The little one there is actually a juvenile. So this large fossil was even bigger than the current big one today, the emperor penguin. And the largest penguin that ever lived, fossil bones of two newly described penguin species, one of them thought to be the largest penguin to ever live, weighing more than 340 pounds. That's a seriously big bird. All right, more than 3 times the size of the largest living penguin, right, have been unearthed in New Zealand. Now, think about that, 3 times the size of the largest living penguin. So what's happened to penguins? Well, it turns out that the oldest penguins are the largest. Now, this one that they've given this new species name to would have been an utterly astonishing sight on the beaches of New Zealand 57 million years ago. So we're still in that same region, the Paleocene time zone, it's considered to be, right. 57 million years ago, and the combination of its sheer size and the incomplete nature of its fossil remains. So they didn't find a whole skeleton, but they found enough bones to identify it as a penguin. And this makes it one of the most intriguing fossil birds ever found. And of course, what's intriguing is that the further back you go in time, the bigger the penguins get, but they are still obviously penguins. So what's the real history of penguins? Well, penguins have always been penguins, which is exactly what Genesis tells us. Living things created according to their kind, and they have multiplied after their kind. But there has been change, and that's important. There has been a lot of change in the world, and we're going to talk about a lot of change in our whole theme tonight. So penguins have always been penguins, but they were bigger and there were more of them. In other words, there were more species of penguins, all within the same kind, but more variety, and they were bigger. There has been a lot of change, but it's not evolutionary change. What we see in the history of penguins is we see design. They are brilliantly designed to swim, to do very quick turns underwater, to walk on land. Brilliant design. But there has been degeneration. There has been loss. They have got smaller, and some of the varieties have died out. And in fact, this is what you get if you look at biology from the mindset or from the understanding that the real history of the world is from good to bad to worse. It was created very good, but it's gone downhill. So we can summarize biblical biology in the light of that real history of the world as creation. It was very good. And we see brilliant examples of design, and we love to report about these in our newsletter because they are good for just lifting our sights to our wonderful God and the amazing things that he has done. And we've got a story about that in the newer newsletter that we've just sent out. So we see design. Then we have a whole lot of processes which are ascribed to evolution, but in fact, they are degenerative processes because sadly the world didn't stay good. It was affected by sin and by God's judgment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the rest of the program here. And we see a number of biological processes which are real. Now, adaptation is actually a design feature, but it has helped creatures adjust partly to the world as it's gone downhill. Natural selection and mutations supposedly drove evolution for millions of years, but they are real processes and we do observe them today, but they do not make anything evolve. In fact, they are really good signs that the world is degenerating. It is going downhill. Things are dying out, and eventually some things completely die out, and you have lots of extinction. And so in the fossil record, we have lots of creatures that do not have a living example today. They have died out. Something between the beginning of the world and what we have now has caused them to die out. So we have a loss of species. So all of those processes, they're very real, but they are degenerative processes They are signs that the world is going downhill, exactly the opposite of evolution. So lots of change. The world has certainly changed, but it has not evolved. Fortunately, that's not the end of the story. The world has changed, but God has not. It's not all bad news. After the fall of man, after that sin and judgment came into the world, God did not abandon the human race, and he didn't abandon the world in general. So the rest of the story is salvation and glory, but we are living in the period of good to bad to worse, design followed by degeneration.